A millionaire decided to test his fiancée's love by pretending to be bankrupt. Her reaction left him speechless. Grayson Harrington, at 33, seemed to have everything a man could desire. Surrounded by loyal friends, enjoying lavish vacations, and possessing a fortune that placed him among the elite, he lived a life befitting a modern-day prince. Yet, beneath the luxury and privilege, Grayson longed for something genuine. Something money could never buy. Everything changed the day he met Seraphina Carter on the sun-drenched coast of Greece. At 25, Seraphina was a breath of fresh air. She was unlike any woman Grayson had ever known, effortlessly charming, spontaneous, and with a smile that could light up the darkest room. She worked in a small clothing store in Denver and came from a modest yet comfortable background, worlds apart from the opulence Grayson was accustomed to. Despite their contrasting lives, they were drawn to each other with an undeniable chemistry. On the golden sands of Greece, they spent countless hours basking in the sun, exchanging laughter over shared stories and revealing dreams that, until then, had belonged to completely different realities. It was as if time stood still just for them. However, the idyllic atmosphere was tinged with an underlying tension. Lucian, one of Grayson's oldest friends, was also on the trip. Like Grayson, he found himself captivated by Seraphina. With his charismatic charm and unwavering confidence, Lucian was a formidable rival. But Seraphina's heart was set from the beginning. Her affection was for Grayson, a truth that was evident to everyone except Lucian. Lucian, however, was not one to accept defeat lightly. After returning from Greece, Grayson and Seraphina faced the harsh reality of distance. He was in New York, deeply entrenched in a demanding business world, while she remained in Denver, living a simple yet content life. Despite the miles between them, their bond grew stronger with each late-night conversation and the occasional, eagerly awaited visit. The spark they had ignited under the Greek sun showed no signs of fading. It wasn't long before Grayson realized he couldn't bear to be apart from her any longer. He meticulously planned a romantic evening on the rooftop of a skyscraper in New York where they could gaze out over the glittering cityscape, just the two of them. Dressed in his finest suit, Grayson presented Seraphina with a small velvet box. His heart raced as he asked, "Seraphina Carter, will you make me the happiest man alive? Will you be my wife?" Tears of joy welled up in Seraphina's eyes as her face broke into a radiant smile. "Yes," she answered, her voice trembling with emotion. Without hesitation, Grayson slipped the elegant ring onto her finger, and they toasted to their future, a moment that seemed to promise a perfect life together. The following day, the couple shared their engagement news with their closest friends. The celebration was filled with laughter, applause, and heartfelt congratulations. Yet, amidst the joyous faces, one stood out: Lucian. His smile was flawless, but it never quite reached his eyes. Beneath his composed exterior, emotions swirled that only he truly understood. Grayson's friends cheered enthusiastically, clinking glasses and offering well wishes to the happy couple. But Lucian sat slightly apart, his smile unwavering, yet his eyes betrayed his concealed disappointment. Grayson noticed, but said nothing, pushing the thought aside, determined to focus on his newfound happiness. Unbeknownst to Seraphina, Grayson was about to test the very foundation of their relationship. He needed to be sure her love was for him, and not for his wealth. With this in mind, he concocted a plan that would change everything. But nothing could have prepared him for her response, a reaction that would leave him questioning everything he thought he knew about love and trust. "Congratulations, Grayson. Congratulations, Seraphina," Lucian said, raising his glass. His voice was smooth, his smile courteous, but there was an undercurrent in his tone, a subtle hesitation that hung in the air just long enough to be noticed. Seraphina was too preoccupied to catch it, her eyes sparkling as she animatedly answered one of her friend's questions about wedding venues and floral arrangements. But Grayson heard it. He tried to brush it off, focusing on the joyous celebration around them, but the look in Lucian's eyes lingered in his mind, like a shadow creeping at the edges of his happiness. He told himself he was imagining things. Lucian was his oldest friend. They had been through thick and thin together. Why would he harbor any resentment? But doubt, once planted, has a way of growing roots. Later that evening, while Seraphina excused herself to freshen up, Lucian approached Grayson with a casualness that felt too deliberate. James and Oliver followed, surrounding Grayson at the restaurant's bar, their faces unusually serious. The shift in their demeanor sent a chill down his spine. "Grayson, don't take this the wrong way," James began, his tone measured but cautious. "We're genuinely happy for you, man, but we can't help wondering, are you sure about this? I mean, isn't it all moving a bit too fast?" Grayson's eyes narrowed. "Too fast? I've never been more certain of anything. I love her. Isn't that all that matters?" "Of course it is," Lucian interjected smoothly, placing a hand on Grayson's shoulder with an almost brotherly familiarity. "But you're the most calculated guy we know. You've always been strategic, never impulsive. And now, after less than a year, marriage? Are you sure you've thought this through?" Grayson's jaw tightened. "I know what I'm doing." "We're not questioning your judgment, Grayson," Oliver added, his voice softening. "But Seraphina, she's amazing, no one's denying that. But don't you think she's, I don't know, a little too eager? I mean, with the whole distance thing. She was the one who kept bringing up how hard it was, right? And now marriage is suddenly the solution?" Grayson felt his pulse quicken. "What are you getting at?" Lucian leaned in, his voice dropping to a murmur. "We're just saying, maybe she's scared of losing you and sees marriage as a way to secure things. It might not be calculated, but emotions can be complex. You need to be absolutely sure before you take this step." Their words hung in the air, heavy and intrusive. Grayson opened his mouth to defend Seraphina, to defend his own certainty, but instead his mind drifted back to those late-night conversations they'd had, the ones where her voice wavered with uncertainty. "I just don't see how this can work, Grayson," she had said, her eyes downcast. "You're in New York. I'm in Denver. We're living in two different worlds. Maybe it would be easier if we ended things now before it gets harder." At the time, he had admired her honesty, her vulnerability, but now, in the echo of Lucian's words, it sounded different. Strategic, even. "Look, man," James continued, his gaze earnest, "we're not saying she's a bad person. Far from it. But love can make people do irrational things. We just don't want to see you get hurt because you rushed into something without seeing the full picture." Grayson took a long sip of his whiskey, the burn in his throat nothing compared to the ache forming in his chest. "I know her. I trust her." But the conviction in his voice wavered. "Of course you do," Lucian agreed, his eyes sincere, too sincere. "We just want you to be certain. You're not just risking your heart, Grayson, you're risking everything." Their words followed him for days, lingering like smoke that refused to clear. He replayed every conversation with Seraphina, dissecting her words, her expressions, searching for hidden motives he desperately hoped weren't there. He remembered how she had once casually mentioned the challenge of long distance, how she had worried aloud about the future. At the time, he had been touched by her honesty, her willingness to confront difficult truths, but now those moments felt tainted, as if each word carried an ulterior motive he hadn't seen before. Doubt, persistent and corrosive, began to cloud his once unwavering faith. He didn't want to believe that Seraphina was capable of manipulation, yet the more he tried to shake off his friend's warnings, the more they clung to him, feeding his insecurities. He looked at the engagement ring on her finger and wondered if it symbolized love or desperation. Grayson was no longer sure of anything, and that terrified him. Now, those same conversations echoed differently in Grayson's mind. Had Seraphina subtly and strategically guided him to the decision of proposing? Was every tender word, every vulnerable confession a calculated move? He hated himself for even considering it, but the seed of doubt had already taken root, fed by Lucian's persistent insinuations. Her smile, once radiant and full of genuine joy, now seemed rehearsed in his memories, perfectly timed, flawlessly delivered. Grayson loathed the direction of his thoughts, but the whispers of suspicion refused to be silent. Lucian played his role flawlessly, his jealousy carefully masked behind a veil of concern. He maintained a facade of friendship, his words always wrapped in the guise of caring advice. "I just want you to be happy, man. I mean, you've got so much on the line. Wouldn't it be wise to take a step back, just for a little while, really get to know her before you make such a huge commitment?" Grayson found himself nodding, even as his heart rebelled. He began to observe Seraphina with a scrutinizing gaze, analyzing every gesture, every word, every look. He watched her laugh, watched her plan their wedding with genuine enthusiasm, watched her speak of their future with hopeful certainty. But the joy he once felt was tainted. What if this wasn't love, but manipulation? What if her eagerness to bridge the distance between them was less about affection and more about securing her future? Grayson hated himself for questioning her sincerity, but Lucian's words had sunk deep, eroding the trust he once held without question. Unaware of the storm brewing in Grayson's mind, Seraphina continued to dream aloud, sharing her excitement about the wedding, playfully suggesting changes to their routines so they could spend more time together. She was radiant, her love for him unmistakable. Or so it seemed. To Grayson, her words began to sound rehearsed, her plans too perfectly aligned with what he wanted to hear. Every affectionate gesture felt calculated, every laugh too perfectly timed. What once felt like spontaneity now seemed suspiciously strategic. Doubt twisted Grayson's love into a maze of suspicion. He lay awake at night, replaying conversations, dissecting her words, searching for hidden motives. He questioned everything, her love, her loyalty, even his own judgment. How well did he truly know the woman he was about to marry? Was he about to make the biggest mistake of his life? And through it all, Lucian watched, his eyes sharp, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. He remained the loyal friend, always present, always concerned, subtly feeding Grayson's insecurities. Inwardly, he reveled in Grayson's growing doubt, satisfied by the distance forming between him and Seraphina. Lucian wasn't content with merely planting seeds of suspicion. He wanted to destroy the bond between them entirely. Jealousy burned within him, urging him forward. He wanted to shatter Grayson's happiness and claim Seraphina's attention for himself. That evening, Lucian picked up his phone, his fingers hovering over the screen before finally dialing Grayson's number. His voice was calm, calculated, masking the anticipation beneath. "Hey, Grayson, I've been doing a lot of thinking about everything, about Seraphina, and I think I've figured out a way for you to get the answers you need." Grayson's voice on the other end was weary, strained. "What are you talking about?" Lucian took a measured breath, making sure his tone was just right. Genuine, concerned, brotherly. "You deserve to know for sure, man. To be absolutely certain that she's with you for who you are, not for what you can give her." Grayson's silence was heavy, a mixture of intrigue and suspicion. "Go on. What if we put her love to the test? Think about it. If she truly loves you for who you are, then money shouldn't matter, right? But if she's with you because of your wealth, then, well, better to find out now than after you've walked down the aisle." That's insane, Lucian. I can't lie to her like that." But his protest was weak, his voice faltering as doubt clouded his thoughts. "I know it sounds drastic, but it's the only way to be sure. Look, if she passes the test, then you'll have nothing to worry about. You'll marry her knowing that her love is real. But if she doesn't, then you'll have saved yourself from a lifetime of regret." Grayson's mind spun, Lucian's logic weaving itself into the fabric of his fears. It was cruel, deceptive, but the uncertainty gnawed at him, relentless. He thought of Seraphina's bright smile, her laughter, her words of love. Were they genuine, or just a means to an end? He closed his eyes, his chest tightening as the possibility of betrayal wrapped itself around his heart. I need to think about this." "Take your time," Lucian replied, his voice laced with false empathy. "I just want what's best for you. Whatever you decide, I'm here for you." After they hung up, Lucian leaned back, a satisfied smirk playing at his lips. Everything was falling into place. Grayson was doubting Seraphina, just as he had planned. The next step would be the final blow. If Grayson went through with the test, Seraphina's reaction, whether genuine or misunderstood, would be enough to destroy their relationship. And Lucian would be there to pick up the pieces, the loyal friend who had been right all along. Grayson stared at his phone, Lucian's words echoing in his mind. He looked at the engagement ring glistening on the table, its brilliance dimmed by the darkness of his thoughts. Was he really about to risk everything just to find out the truth? And just like that, the poison of doubt continued to spread, threatening to destroy the love he once believed was unbreakable. "And how exactly do you propose I do that, Lucian? What are you really suggesting?" Grayson's voice was tight, strained by the moral weight of the conversation. Lucian leaned back, his demeanor unnervingly calm, as if discussing the weather. "It's simple, Grayson. You tell her you've lost everything. Pretend that one of your deals went south, that your fortune is gone. Watch how she reacts. If she stays by your side, you'll know her love is real. But if she leaves, well, then you'll know the truth." Grayson laughed, but it was hollow, tinged with disbelief. "Are you insane? Pretending I've lost my fortune? That's cruel. It would destroy her." "I'm not saying it's easy," Lucian replied smoothly, his voice dripping with false empathy. "But think about it, Grayson. I'm your best friend. I see things you can't. I see the way she looks at you, the way she talks about the future. What if she's only interested in your money? Wouldn't you rather find out now than after you're married? After it's too late?" The words hit Grayson like a punch to the gut. He trusted Lucian. They had been like brothers, inseparable since college. If anyone had his best interests at heart, it was him. At least, that's what Grayson believed. I don't know, Lucian. It feels wrong. She's different. She's not like that." His voice wavered, betraying his uncertainty. Lucian seized the moment, his gaze unwavering. "Exactly. She seems perfect, doesn't she? Almost too perfect. But what if it's all an act? Grayson, you're one of the smartest men I know. Don't let your emotions blind you. This test, it could save you from a lifetime of pain." Grayson stood there, phone pressed to his ear, the room closing in around him. Lucian's words echoed through his mind, intertwining with the doubts that had already taken root. He thought of Seraphina's words, the way she had questioned their future because of the distance. He remembered her tears, her smile, her reassurances, but now all of it felt tainted, twisted by suspicion. "I don't know if I can do this," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You can," Lucian said firmly, his voice commanding, "and you will. Because you need to know the truth, Grayson. You need to be sure that she loves you for who you are, not for what you can give her. And if she passes the test, then great. You'll marry her knowing that her love is genuine. But if she fails, then you'll have dodged a bullet. You'll thank me later." The logic was cold, brutal, and painfully convincing. Lucian appealed to the side of Grayson that had always been calculated, cautious. He played on Grayson's deepest fear, the fear of being used, of being betrayed. And despite himself, Grayson felt the resolve forming. "Okay," he breathed out, his voice cracking. "I'll do it." On the other end of the line, Lucian's lips curled into a satisfied smile, one that Grayson couldn't see. "You're making the right choice, Grayson. This is for your peace of mind. I'm proud of you." But Grayson didn't feel proud. He felt sick, the guilt gnawing at him, even as he tried to convince himself that this was the only way to protect his heart. In the days that followed, Grayson meticulously prepared to stage the lie. He discreetly contacted his lawyer, crafting a plausible story of financial ruin. Together, they created false documents, investment statements showing catastrophic losses, debt notices that looked legitimate enough to pass any scrutiny. Grayson went so far as to close a few accounts, temporarily, just in case Seraphina checked. He rehearsed the story, practicing his expressions in front of the mirror, ensuring his voice would crack at the right moments, his eyes conveying just the right amount of despair. It was a performance, and it needed to be flawless. Meanwhile, Lucian continued to play his part, offering support, encouraging Grayson whenever his resolve wavered. "Remember, this is for your own good. You deserve to know the truth." Each time, Grayson nodded, burying his guilt beneath layers of rationalization. Seraphina noticed the change in Grayson almost immediately. He seemed distant, preoccupied, his laughter forced. She asked him if everything was all right, her concern genuine, her eyes soft with worry. He lied, saying he was just stressed from work, but inside, the guilt was crushing. Finally, the day came. Grayson invited Seraphina over, his heart pounding as he led her into his office. His face was pale, his demeanor broken, the documents strategically scattered across his desk. "Grayson, what's going on? You're scaring me," Seraphina said, her voice trembling. He looked up, eyes hollow, voice heavy. "I've lost everything, Seraphina. I made a bad investment. All my money's gone. I'm bankrupt." Her face went white, her body swaying as if she might collapse. Her hands flew to her mouth, tears welling up in her eyes. But before she could speak, before she could react, Grayson's own heart broke, because in that moment, he realized he didn't want to know the truth. He didn't want to see her walk away. He didn't want to lose her. But it was too late. The lie was out, and now all he could do was watch her response and hope desperately that his fears were unfounded. In the shadows, Lucian watched from a distance, a glass of whiskey in his hand, satisfaction gleaming in his eyes. His plan was unfolding perfectly, and soon, Grayson's world would crumble. And Seraphina? She had no idea that the man she loved had just shattered her trust with a single, devastating lie. All of this was done with an ever-growing weight on Grayson's heart. Each step felt like a betrayal, not just of Seraphina, but of the love they shared. Yet the doubt planted by Lucian had taken root, spreading through his mind like a poison he couldn't purge. It was the only way, he convinced himself. He had to know for certain. The night finally arrived, the night he was meant to drop the lie that could either solidify his trust or shatter everything he held dear. Grayson sat stiffly on the sofa, his fingers intertwined with Seraphina's as she animatedly recounted her latest wedding ideas. Her eyes sparkled, her laughter filling the room with warmth, but Grayson could hardly focus. The guilt gnawed at him, twisting his stomach into knots. "Seraphina?" he interrupted, his voice tense, causing her to stop mid-sentence. I need to tell you something." Her smile faded, replaced by a look of concern. "What is it, love? Are you okay?" He looked down, his hands trembling. He had practiced this moment, rehearsed every word, every expression, but nothing could have prepared him for the crushing weight of actually saying it. He took a deep breath, forcing his voice to remain steady. "I made a bad investment, something I was sure would pay off, but I was wrong. I lost everything, Seraphina. I'm broke." The words hung in the air, heavy and irreversible. He felt his chest tighten as he watched her reaction, his eyes locked on her face, desperate to decipher her thoughts. Seraphina's eyes widened, her body going rigid as she processed his confession. Her mouth opened, but no words came out, and for a terrifying moment, Grayson thought she might just walk out without another word. The silence was suffocating. Grayson's pulse quickened, each heartbeat echoing in his ears. This was it. The moment of truth. "Seraphina," he continued, his voice cracking under the weight of his lie, I didn't want to hide this from you. You deserve to know the truth." She raised a trembling hand, gesturing for him to stop. Her eyes dropped to the floor, her breathing shallow and uneven. Without a word, she rose from the sofa and walked toward the kitchen, her movements slow and deliberate, as if in a daze. Grayson watched her go, his heart sinking. His instinct screamed at him to follow, to hold her, to beg her forgiveness for the cruel trick he was playing. But his feet were frozen, weighed down by guilt and fear. In the kitchen, he heard the tap running, the sound of water pouring into glasses. It was such a mundane noise, yet it felt ominous, echoing in the silent tension that had engulfed the room. Grayson felt his chest constrict, the realization hitting him that he might have made the biggest mistake of his life. Finally, Seraphina returned, holding 2 glasses of water. She sat down beside him, her posture tense, her expression unreadable. She handed him one of the glasses without meeting his gaze, then took a small sip from her own. For several agonizing moments, she stared at the glass in her hands, her fingers trembling. Grayson watched her, the silence stretching out, each second an eternity. His heart was pounding so loudly he was certain she could hear it. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady, carrying a weight that made Grayson's throat tighten. "Grayson, when I met you, I never imagined this. I never imagined being with someone like you, someone from a world so different from mine. You have so much more than I could ever dream of. And me? I come from a simple life." She paused, her fingers tracing the edge of the glass as she took a shaky breath. Grayson's stomach dropped. his worst fears materializing before him. "But that was never what drew me to you." Her voice wavered, raw with emotion. "It wasn't your wealth or your status or any of that. It was you, just you. The way you listened to me, the way you made me feel like the most important person in the world, the way you look at me like nothing else matters." Grayson felt his chest tighten, his throat burning as shame flooded through him. She looked up then, her eyes glistening with tears, her expression both vulnerable and resolute. "I didn't fall in love with your lifestyle, Grayson. I fell in love with the man who stood by my side on a beach in Greece, who laughed with me, who shared his dreams with me. That's the man I want to marry, not the millionaire, not the businessman. Just you." His vision blurred as his own tears threatened to spill over. The air felt heavy, his guilt pressing down on him like a weight he could no longer bear. He wanted to confess, to fall to his knees and tell her the truth, to beg for her forgiveness, but his throat was locked, his heart breaking under the strain of his own deception. I never cared about the money, Grayson. Not then, not now. All I care about is us. If you've lost everything, then we'll rebuild together. I don't need the luxury or the security. I just need you." Grayson's breath caught, his chest aching as her words shattered his every doubt. She wasn't leaving. She wasn't angry. She wasn't disappointed. She was ready to stand by him, to face the hardship, to fight for their love. And that's when the full magnitude of his lie hit him, crushing him under the weight of his own distrust. He had tested her love, manipulated her emotions, all because of his own insecurities. Insecurities that Lucian had planted, knowing exactly how to exploit them. "Seraphina." His voice cracked, the truth clawing at his throat, begging to be set free. But he couldn't do it. Not now. Not when she was looking at him with such unwavering love and trust. She moved closer, wrapping her arms around him, her head resting against his shoulder. "We'll get through this, Grayson, no matter what. I'm not going anywhere." His body trembled as he held her, his heart breaking under the weight of his deceit. He wanted to confess, to end the lie and face the consequences. But the fear of losing her was too great, the shame too deep. So he held her, his arms wrapped tightly around her, his tears falling silently as he whispered, "I don't deserve you." She pulled back, her eyes soft and loving. "Don't be silly, we deserve each other." He forced a smile, his heart shattering as the truth remained locked inside him, suffocated by his own cowardice. And in the shadows of his mind, Lucian's voice echoed, a cruel reminder of the price of doubt. Grayson had everything he ever wanted, but now he would have to live with the knowledge that he had nearly destroyed it all. All because he hadn't trusted the woman who loved him more than anything. Grayson's eyes widened, his breath catching in his throat. He tried to speak, to explain, to apologize, but Seraphina lifted her hand, her expression firm yet tender. "Let me finish," she said softly, her voice unwavering. "I fell in love with you, Grayson. With the man who makes me laugh until my stomach hurts. With the man who listens to me when I'm feeling lost. The man who never makes me feel small, even though I live in a world that sometimes feels too big and too far away from yours." Her voice cracked, but her resolve didn't falter. This was never about the money, it was never about the lifestyle or the luxury, it was always about you. Grayson's heart twisted painfully as he looked at her, the woman who had just shattered every fear, every doubt, with her raw honesty. His vision blurred as he took in the tears glistening in her eyes, the strength in her posture. She was standing by him, even when he had given her every reason to walk away. "If you've lost everything," she continued, her voice trembling with emotion, "then that doesn't change who you are. And if we can't have the grand wedding you wanted, then let's cancel it. I don't need a huge ceremony, or designer dresses, or an extravagant venue to marry you. I just need you." Grayson's chest tightened, his heart leaping at her words. She wasn't just promising to stay. She was offering to give up everything, to build a life with him from scratch. She was proving her love in the most selfless, beautiful way imaginable. Still, a part of him wanted to make sure she understood the gravity of what she was accepting. He owed her at least that much. "Seraphina, I don't even know what it's going to be like from now on. I don't know how we're supposed to start again or if we'll ever get back to the life we planned." His voice broke, his vulnerability laid bare. She smiled then, a small, gentle smile that radiated courage and love. We'll start again from scratch, together. We'll live simply, and maybe that's exactly what we need. A life with fewer things and more meaning. A life that's truly ours. Grayson's heart shattered, not from pain, but from the overwhelming love he felt for her. A love he had foolishly doubted. Without another word, he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly he feared he might break her. Her scent enveloped him, familiar and comforting, her warmth grounding him even as his world spun with guilt and regret. But, even as he held her, his chest tightening with emotion, he couldn't escape the crushing realization of what he had done. He had tested her love, put her through this cruel charade, all because of his own insecurities. All because he had let Lucian's poison seep into his mind. I did this to her, his conscience screamed, guilt gnawing at him like a relentless beast. I made her believe everything was gone. I made her suffer for no reason. He tightened his hold, his eyes burning with unshed tears. He wanted to tell her the truth, to confess everything, but the words wouldn't come. How could he destroy her trust now, after she had just laid her heart bare? Seraphina pulled back slightly, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears, but her expression was serene, her love for him undeniable. She took his hand, intertwining their fingers. Tomorrow, I'll call the vendors and cancel everything. We don't need a big wedding. We just need each other. Grayson swallowed hard, his throat painfully tight. He could only nod, his voice lost beneath the weight of his shame. How could she be so willing to sacrifice everything for him when he had been so ready to question her intentions? As she began to talk about how they could adjust their lives, simplify their plans, Grayson could only watch her, his heart aching with every word. She was radiant, even in this moment of loss, her spirit unbroken. She was willing to stand by him, to face hardship, to rebuild from the ground up, all because she loved him, truly and unconditionally. She's perfect, he thought, his heart sinking, and I don't deserve her. Every time she smiled, every time she reassured him that they would be okay, Grayson felt his guilt deepen. He had manipulated her, exploited her love, all because he had been too afraid to trust her. He had tested her, doubted her, hurt her, all because of his own fears. I ruined this, his mind screamed. I ruined us. But he couldn't bring himself to say the words. Not now. Not when she was looking at him with so much love and faith. If he told her the truth, he would lose her. She would never forgive him for doubting her, for orchestrating such a cruel test. So he remained silent, swallowing his guilt, forcing himself to smile as she continued to speak of their future. He squeezed her hand, his fingers trembling as he whispered, I don't deserve you, Seraphina. She leaned her head on his shoulder, her voice soft and warm. Of course you do. We deserve each other. Her words cut through him, sharp and unforgiving, because he knew they weren't true. She deserved honesty, loyalty, trust, everything he had failed to give her. And he would have to live with that knowledge every single day. As Seraphina continued to plan their simpler life, unaware of the lie that hung between them, Grayson's heart broke over and over again. He had everything he ever wanted, yet he had destroyed his own happiness with doubt and deception. He looked at her, the woman who had just sacrificed everything for him, and realized that he might have ruined the most beautiful love he would ever know. All because he hadn't trusted her. And in the back of his mind he could almost hear Lucian's voice, echoing with triumph. Grayson had been trapped in a whirlwind of emotions since his conversation with Seraphina. On the surface, he should have felt relieved. Her reaction to his supposed bankruptcy had been more than he could have hoped for. She had proven her love for him in the most unconditional, selfless way possible. But relief was nowhere to be found. Instead, guilt weighed on him, a constant, unrelenting pressure that wrapped itself around his heart. He had tested her love, manipulated her trust, and now he was drowning in the consequences of his own actions. The next morning, after another sleepless night, Grayson made a decision. He needed to talk to Lucian. Maybe hearing his friend's perspective would help him find a way to move forward. Maybe Lucian could help him figure out how to confess the truth to Seraphina without completely destroying her trust. But deep down, he already knew the truth. Nothing would make this right. He dialed Lucian's number, his fingers trembling as he waited for the call to connect. As soon as Lucian's voice came through the line, sounding casual and carefree, Grayson got straight to the point. "Lucian, I did it. I told Seraphina about the bankruptcy." There was a slight pause, so brief that Grayson almost didn't notice, before Lucian responded, his tone perfectly measured. "And? How did she react?" Grayson let out a heavy sigh, his shoulders sagging. "She surprised me. She said she loves me and that it doesn't change anything. She even said we should cancel the big wedding and start over from scratch, together." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then Lucian let out a laugh that sounded almost too cheerful, too perfectly timed. "Well, there you go, Will. That's the answer you were looking for, right? She's the real deal. She loves you for who you are." "Yeah," Grayson murmured, his voice heavy with guilt. "But it doesn't feel right. I put her through hell, Lucian. I made her believe everything was gone, just to test her. It was cruel. She didn't deserve that." Lucian's jaw tightened on the other end of the line, his hands clenching into fists. He forced himself to maintain his friendly tone, even as anger boiled inside him. "Don't be so hard on yourself, Will. You did it for a good reason. And look, it all worked out. She passed the test. That just proves she's the right woman for you." Grayson mumbled something in agreement, but the words tasted bitter. The conversation hadn't brought him any relief. If anything, it only made him feel worse. He thanked Lucian half-heartedly and ended the call, his shoulders slumping as the weight of his guilt grew heavier. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Lucian's façade shattered the moment the call ended. His fake smile dropped, his face twisting in frustration. He threw his phone onto the table, the impact reverberating through the room. "Damn it," he hissed, his eyes burning with fury. How had this happened? He had played his part perfectly, planting doubts in Grayson's mind, setting the stage for Seraphina's failure. He had expected her to show some sign of hesitation, to falter, to reveal that her love was conditional. But she hadn't. Instead, she had reacted perfectly, better than he could have imagined. She had proven her loyalty, her love, her willingness to sacrifice everything for Grayson, and that had only brought them closer. Lucian felt rage boiling beneath his skin, jealousy curling around his heart like a serpent. He had watched Seraphina from the sidelines, believing he stood a chance. But now, thanks to her unwavering devotion, Grayson's bond with her was stronger than ever. "I won't lose her," he muttered through gritted teeth. "I won't let him have her." Over the next few days, Grayson tried to resume his life, focusing on work and planning a simpler future with Seraphina. She was already calling vendors to cancel the extravagant wedding arrangements, insisting that they could still have a beautiful day without all the luxury. But despite her determination, something felt different. Grayson noticed subtle changes, almost imperceptible at first. She seemed less present, distracted even. There was a distant look in her eyes during conversations, as if part of her was somewhere else. It wasn't just her demeanor either. She was on her phone more often, her fingers moving quickly across the screen, her lips curving into a faint smile before she hastily put the phone away. It happened once, then twice, and then so frequently that Grayson couldn't ignore it. A knot tightened in his stomach, an uncomfortable feeling he tried to brush off, but the more he observed, the more his suspicions grew. Who was she texting? Why did she look so secretive? Why did she hide her phone the moment he walked into the room? He reminded himself that she had passed the test, that she had proven her love was genuine, but the doubt persisted, a whisper at the back of his mind. What if he had pushed her away with his lie? What if she was having second thoughts? Or worse, what if she had found comfort in someone else? The thought made his chest tighten painfully, his mind conjuring images of Seraphina laughing at her phone, smiling at messages that weren't from him. Meanwhile, Lucian watched from the shadows, his anger evolving into a new plan. If Seraphina wouldn't fail the test, then he would create a situation where she would have no choice but to turn away from Grayson. He began to send her anonymous messages, pretending to be an old friend from Denver. The messages were harmless at first, simple greetings and casual questions about her life. But as the days passed, they grew more frequent, more intimate. He carefully crafted each message to sound just flirtatious enough to spark curiosity, just familiar enough to seem harmless. Grayson noticed the change but said nothing, his insecurities growing with each passing day. He watched Seraphina smile at her phone, saw the way she seemed to glow with anticipation before checking her messages, and it tore him apart. The guilt of his own deception mixed with the growing suspicion that she was hiding something from him. And as the days went by, Grayson found himself trapped in a cycle of doubt, unable to trust her and unable to trust himself. He had set out to test her love, but now it was his own love, his own trust, that was crumbling. And Lucian was just getting started. Seraphina started going out alone more often, something she rarely did during her stays in New York. It started subtly, short trips here and there, usually with a quick excuse and a promise to be back soon. But as the days went on, her outings became more frequent and lasted longer. One morning, as she slipped on a light jacket and grabbed her handbag, Grayson asked, "Where are you headed?" He tried to keep his tone light, casual, but the curiosity was evident. "Oh, just running some errands. I need to sort a few things out," she replied, her voice light as she leaned in to give him a quick kiss. "Don't worry, I won't be long." Grayson watched her walk out the door, his chest tightening. Something about her demeanor felt different, distant, almost secretive. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the thought. "You're just being paranoid," he told himself. "She's doing all this for you." But no matter how hard he tried to ignore it, the feeling of unease wouldn't go away. He began to notice patterns in her schedule. She always left around the same time and returned hours later, often with no explanation other than a vague, "I was just sorting things out." One afternoon, while working from home, Grayson received a call from one of the wedding suppliers. "Mr. Harrington, I just wanted to confirm the cancellation of services. Ms. Seraphina has already been in touch." The supplier's voice was polite, professional, but there was something in her tone that made Grayson's heart skip a beat. "Oh, thank you. I appreciate the follow-up," he replied, forcing his voice to remain steady. When he hung up, he stared at his phone, a cold knot forming in his stomach. Seraphina had promised to take care of canceling the wedding arrangements, and he believed her, but something about the supplier's words felt off. Was Seraphina really just canceling the wedding, or was she planning something else? That evening, over dinner, Grayson tried to bring up the topic without sounding suspicious. "You've been busy lately," he said, keeping his tone casual. "Is everything okay? I've noticed you've been running around a lot." Seraphina looked up, surprise flickering in her eyes before she offered him a soft smile. "Yeah, everything's fine. I've just been trying to adjust some things now that our plans have changed. There's a lot to sort out, you know." Her answer seemed genuine enough, but there was a hesitation in her voice that made Grayson's chest tighten. He wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her. But his instincts told him that something wasn't right. Over the next few days, he watched her more closely, taking note of the way she seemed distracted, her mind always somewhere else. He noticed how she checked her phone constantly, smiling faintly before quickly putting it away. He told himself it was nothing, that she was just dealing with the stress of their changing lives. But doubt had already taken root, whispering cruel possibilities. What if she's having second thoughts? What if she's only now realizing what she's given up? The idea tormented him, robbing him of sleep and peace of mind. He tried to rationalize it, to tell himself that Seraphina was simply adjusting to their new reality, but the nagging suspicion refused to be silenced. Then, one evening, Seraphina's phone buzzed on the table, the screen lighting up with a notification. She was in the shower, her soft humming drifting from the bathroom. Grayson's eyes fell on her phone, the light taunting him, beckoning him. His heart raced as he moved toward the device, his hand trembling as he picked it up. He knew it was wrong, knew that he was crossing a line, but his curiosity was suffocating, his need for answers stronger than his guilt. Before he could unlock it, he heard her voice. "Grayson, are you out there?" His heart leapt in his chest as he fumbled to put the phone back, his hand shaking. "Yeah, I'm here," he called out, his voice strained as he tried to sound natural. He took a deep breath, steadying himself as Seraphina walked into the room, her hair wet and her face glowing from the warmth of the shower. She smiled at him, her eyes soft and warm. "What are you up to?" Grayson forced himself to smile back, his heart pounding. "Nothing, just thinking." She laughed, moving closer to press a kiss to his cheek. "You think too much." But Grayson couldn't help himself. He watched her as she picked up her phone, her fingers moving quickly to check her messages. Her eyes lingered on the screen, her lips curling into a small, secretive smile, before she looked back up at him, her expression perfectly innocent. His stomach twisted, his heart sinking as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. He wanted to believe that she was being honest, that she wasn't hiding anything, but the doubt was stronger, feeding on his insecurities, twisting his thoughts. Who was she texting? What was she hiding? The questions haunted him, replaying over and over in his mind. He tried to shake them off, to remind himself that Seraphina had stood by him, had sacrificed everything for him. But the doubts remained, persistent and unforgiving. He knew he was spiraling, but he couldn't stop himself. Not now. Not when everything felt so uncertain. While Seraphina continued her routine, seemingly unaware of the turmoil brewing inside him, she still kissed him goodnight, still laughed at his jokes, still looked at him with eyes full of love. But Grayson couldn't help but wonder. Was it real, or had his lies started to unravel everything he held dear? Seraphina walked into the living room, her hair damp, the towel draped over her shoulders as she gave Grayson a warm smile. She settled onto the sofa beside him, her presence filling the room with a comfort that Grayson once found reassuring, but now only served to deepen his confusion. "I was thinking," she began, her voice casual, but her eyes flickering with something Grayson couldn't quite read. "Maybe I'll stay here in New York for a few more days. Since you're selling the house soon and we'll be moving into something smaller, I thought it'd be nice to enjoy this place a little longer before we start this new phase." She paused, glancing at him before asking, "Speaking of which, when exactly do you have to sell the house?" Grayson's heart skipped a beat, his pulse quickening as he forced himself to smile. Soon. I'm still sorting out the details." Seraphina nodded, her expression soft, her body relaxing against the cushions, but Grayson's mind was reeling, every nerve in his body on high alert. Why was she so curious about the sale? Why was she suddenly so eager to stay longer in New York, especially now that she believed he was bankrupt? He tried to brush it off, to convince himself that he was overthinking, but the doubt was already there, gnawing at him like a parasite feeding on his insecurities. That afternoon, Seraphina left the apartment again, her excuse vague and her demeanor casual. "I've got some things to sort out," she said with a smile, before kissing him on the cheek. "I won't be long." Grayson watched her walk out the door, his jaw clenching as his hands tightened into fists. He had tried to be patient, tried to trust her, but the uncertainty was suffocating. He needed answers. He needed the truth, even if it meant breaking his own moral code. Without giving himself time to reconsider, Grayson grabbed his car keys and followed her. He kept his distance, his heart pounding as he watched her walk through the crowded streets, her head bent toward her phone. She seemed distracted, almost nervous, glancing at her screen before hailing a cab. Grayson's stomach churned as he followed the taxi, his mind racing with possibilities, none of them good. His thoughts spiraled as he tried to piece together the puzzle. Why was she keeping secrets? What was she hiding? After a tense drive through the city, the cab stopped in front of a discreet but elegant restaurant. Grayson parked a safe distance away, his chest tightening as he watched Seraphina step out of the car. She straightened her coat, her eyes scanning the street as if looking for someone. And then he saw him. A tall man with perfectly styled hair and an expensive suit walked toward her, his smile warm and familiar. Seraphina's face lit up, her lips curving into a smile that made Grayson's blood run cold. They shared a brief hug, friendly but comfortable, as if they had done it many times before. Grayson's heart stopped, his body going numb as he watched them walk into the restaurant together. His mind spun, his thoughts a chaotic mess as he struggled to process what he was seeing. Who was this man? Why was Seraphina meeting him in secret? Why hadn't she mentioned it? His chest tightened, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps as jealousy and insecurity clawed at his heart. He tried to rationalize it, to tell himself there was an innocent explanation, but his mind refused to listen. Before he could stop himself, Grayson grabbed his phone, his hands trembling as he dialed Lucian's number. He needed to vent. He needed advice, even if it was from the man who had orchestrated this entire situation. Lucian picked up after the second ring, his voice casual. "Grayson, what's up, man?" Grayson's words tumbled out in a rush, his voice shaking. "I followed Seraphina. She's at a restaurant with another man." Lucian was silent for a moment, long enough for Grayson to hear the faintest hint of satisfaction in his breath. But when Lucian finally spoke, his voice was laced with concern. "Are you sure? I mean, did you see them together?" "Yes," Grayson hissed, his eyes fixed on the restaurant entrance. "They hugged. She's in there with him right now. I don't know what to think." Lucian made a sympathetic sound, his voice low and serious. "I'm so sorry, Will. I know this must be tearing you apart, but maybe there's an explanation? Maybe it's just an old friend?" Grayson's grip tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. "Why wouldn't she tell me then? Why all the secrecy?" Lucian's silence was perfectly timed, his hesitation a calculated move to stoke Grayson's doubts. "I don't know, man, but you deserve the truth. Do you want me to come down there? We can confront them together." Grayson shook his head, his anger boiling beneath the surface. "No, I need to do this on my own." "All right," Lucian said, his voice soothing. "But be careful, Will. Don't let your emotions get the best of you. If you need anything, I'm here for you." "Thanks, Lucian," Grayson muttered, his jaw clenched. "I'll call you later." As he hung up, Grayson felt a surge of rage he could barely contain. His eyes burned with jealousy, his mind replaying the image of Seraphina smiling at another man, embracing him as if they shared a secret. He wanted to storm into the restaurant, to demand answers, to confront her with everything he was feeling. But he stayed in the car, his body rigid with tension, his heart breaking as he waited. The minutes dragged on, each one a fresh wave of pain. He watched the door, his eyes never leaving the entrance, waiting for her to come out. When she finally did, her face was calm, her expression serene. The man walked her to the curb, his hand lingering on her shoulder as they said goodbye. She laughed at something he said, her head tilting back, her smile radiant and unguarded. Grayson felt his heart shatter. He watched as she got into a cab, watched the man stand there, his eyes lingering on the car as it drove away. The look on his face was unmistakable. Fondness, admiration, longing. It was the look of a man who wanted something more. Grayson's hands shook as he gripped the steering wheel, his mind spinning as the doubts and fears overwhelmed him. Had she lied to him? Was she seeing someone else? Was this why she had been so distant? He followed Seraphina. "She's with another man. Whatever you need, I'm here for you, brother." Grayson's eyes burned with tears he refused to shed, his heart breaking beneath the weight of his own lies. He had tested her, manipulated her, deceived her, and now he was the one drowning in doubt. And somewhere far away, Lucian smiled. "Lucian," Grayson began, his voice tight with anger and pain. "I followed Seraphina. She's with another man right now. They went into a restaurant together." Lucian allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction, his lips curling into a smirk before he quickly rearranged his features into an expression of concern. He was careful to maintain the illusion of the loyal, supportive friend. "Wow, okay, calm down, man," he replied, his voice carefully measured to sound genuinely worried. "You don't know who this guy is. It could be anything, an old friend, a work colleague. It doesn't necessarily mean what you think it does." "Then why didn't she tell me?" Grayson's voice was strained, cracking under the weight of his emotions. "Why would she keep this a secret if it was innocent?" Lucian feigned hesitation, knowing exactly how to push Grayson further into doubt. "I don't know, Will, but you need to keep your head on straight. Don't go in there and make a scene. Be smart about this." Grayson was silent, his breathing heavy as he tried to calm himself. Lucian seized the opportunity to plant the next seed. "Listen," Lucian continued, his voice soothing but firm. "Take some pictures, document everything. Then go home and wait. When she gets back, you confront her with the evidence. That way, she can't deny anything." Grayson's hands were shaking, his knuckles white as he gripped the phone. Yeah, you're right. I need proof." "Exactly," Lucian replied, his tone warm and reassuring. "I'm here for you, man. Just don't do anything rash. Get the evidence first." "Thanks, Lucian," Grayson whispered, his voice breaking. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Lucian's eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction. "Anytime, Will. That's what friends are for." Grayson hung up and turned his attention back to the restaurant. He adjusted his phone, zooming in to capture Seraphina and the man through the large glass window. His heart felt like it was being torn apart as he took several photos, documenting every smile, every glance, every moment that seemed to betray his trust. When he was done, he sank back into his car seat, his hands shaking as he scrolled through the pictures. His chest tightened, each image a knife twisting deeper into his heart. He drove home in a haze, his vision blurred with tears he refused to shed. Anger surged through him, followed by a crushing wave of sorrow. How could she do this to him? After everything they had been through? His mind raced with memories of their time together, her laughter, her smiles, her whispered promises. It all felt like a lie now, tainted by the betrayal he believed he had witnessed. By the time he reached his apartment, his emotions were a tangled mess of rage, confusion, and grief. He paced back and forth, his eyes darting to the clock every few minutes. Time seemed to crawl, each second stretching into an eternity as he mentally rehearsed what he would say to her. Finally, the front door unlocked, and Seraphina walked in, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Hi, love. Is everything okay?" Her voice was soft, her expression warm and genuine, but Grayson's chest tightened with anger. How could she act so normal? How could she look at him like that after spending her afternoon with another man? He took a deep breath, his hands trembling as he fought to control his emotions. "Seraphina, can we talk?" She blinked, her smile fading as she registered the tension in his voice. "Of course, what's wrong?" Grayson gestured to the sofa. "Sit down." His voice was cold, his eyes dark with hurt. He remained standing, pacing the room as he tried to gather the courage to confront her. Seraphina sat down slowly, her eyes wide with concern. "Grayson, you're scaring me. What's going on?" His jaw clenched, his shoulders stiff as he turned to face her. "I know you've been going out a lot lately. I know you've been keeping secrets." Her eyes widened, her face paling. I don't understand. What are you talking about?" His hands were shaking, his anger barely contained. "Today, I followed you." Her mouth fell open, her body going rigid. "You? You followed me?" "Yes," he snapped, his voice harsh. "I followed you to that restaurant. I saw you with him." Seraphina's eyes filled with confusion, her brows knitting together. "Him? Who are you talking about?" Grayson pulled out his phone, his hands trembling as he scrolled to the photos. He held it up, his jaw tight. This is what I'm talking about. Who is he, and why were you meeting him behind my back?" Seraphina's face went pale, her eyes fixed on the screen. Her mouth opened, then closed, her hands trembling as she reached for the phone. "Grayson, it's not what you think." "Not what I think?" he repeated, his voice rising. "Then what is it, Seraphina? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're sneaking around behind my back." Her eyes filled with tears, her shoulders shaking as she looked up at him. "Grayson, please, just listen to me. I was going to tell you, I didn't know how." His chest tightened, his anger flaring. "Tell me what?" She took a deep breath, wiping at her tears. He's a lawyer. I've been meeting with him to sort out some paperwork, because I've been planning something for us." Grayson's heart skipped a beat, his anger faltering. "What are you talking about?" Seraphina's voice broke, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "I was trying to buy a house, Grayson. I've been saving for years, and when you told me about the bankruptcy, I thought maybe I could help. I wanted to surprise you. I wanted to give us a fresh start, somewhere we could be happy, without the pressure of money or debts." The air left Grayson's lungs, his body going numb as he stumbled back, his phone slipping from his hand. His mind reeled, his chest tightening as her words sank in. She wasn't betraying him. She wasn't leaving him. She was trying to save him. "Seraphina, His voice broke, his vision blurring with tears. "I'm so sorry, I didn't trust you." Seraphina looked up at him, her eyes filled with hurt. "You followed me. You spied on me. You doubted me." Grayson fell to his knees, his hands shaking. I thought you were going to leave me." Her expression softened, her voice breaking. You should have just asked me." The truth crashed down on him, shattering his heart. He had been so blinded by doubt that he had destroyed the very trust he had been trying to protect, and he didn't know if he could ever fix it. Seraphina's smile vanished, her face hardening as her eyes locked onto Grayson's with a mixture of shock and hurt. Her voice was low, trembling with disbelief. "You followed me?" Grayson's jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides. "Yes, I saw you go into that restaurant with another man. Who is he, Seraphina? And why didn't you tell me about him?" The room fell into a tense, suffocating silence. Seraphina looked at him, her expression shifting from shock to indignation. It felt as if the ground beneath Grayson was crumbling, his worst fears threatening to consume him. Seraphina sat on the sofa, her body rigid, her eyes burning with a pain that matched his own. She looked as though she had been accused of the unthinkable, as if she were on trial for a crime she hadn't committed. Meanwhile, Grayson stood above her, his posture tense, his movements restless as he paced the room. He was trying to contain the anger, the betrayal, the heartbreak that coursed through him like poison. "I just want the truth, Seraphina," he demanded, his voice rough and uneven. "Who is that man? Why did you meet him in secret? Are you cheating on me?" Seraphina's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat as his accusation hit her like a slap. Her shock quickly morphed into hurt and then into a fiery indignation. "How can you even ask me that?" Her voice trembled, raw with emotion. "After everything we've been through, after all the love I've shown you, how could you think I would betray you like that?" "Then explain." Grayson's voice was louder now, laced with frustration and pain. "If you're not cheating, then why all the secrecy? Why didn't you tell me about him? How am I supposed to believe you have nothing to hide when you've been sneaking around behind my back?" Seraphina's eyes filled with tears, her chest tightening as she looked at him, at the man she loved, the man who now looked at her like she was his worst enemy. "I can't believe you're saying these things," she whispered, her voice breaking as the tears finally spilled over, hot and uncontrollable. "I never thought you could look at me like this, like I'm someone you can't trust." "What choice do I have?" Grayson shot back, his voice cracking. "I see you going out all the time, acting distant, meeting another man, and you expect me to just believe it's nothing? Do you have any idea how that looks? How that feels?" Seraphina's tears flowed freely now, her body shaking as his words cut into her like a blade. She struggled to catch her breath, her heart breaking as she realized just how deep his doubts ran. "You're treating me like I'm some kind of monster," she choked out, her voice trembling. "Like everything I've ever felt for you is a lie. I would never hurt you like that, Grayson. I would never betray you." Grayson's face twisted with anguish, his hands trembling as he ran them through his hair. "Then tell me the truth. If you're not cheating on me, then why did you lie? Why all the secrecy? Why did you meet him behind my back?" Seraphina stood up suddenly, her eyes blazing with pain and anger. "I didn't lie. I never lied to you, but you never asked. You never trusted me enough to ask." "I didn't trust you because you were hiding things from me," he shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. "You kept secrets, you went behind my back, and now you're standing here crying as if I'm the one who did something wrong?" Seraphina's face crumbled, her shoulders shaking as she tried to hold herself together. Her heart felt like it was being ripped apart, her love for him battling with the agony of his accusations. "I was meeting with him because I was trying to do something good," she whispered, her voice so broken that it was barely audible. "I didn't want you to know because I wanted it to be a surprise. I was trying to save us." Grayson's eyes narrowed, his suspicion not yet satisfied. "Save us? By meeting another man in secret? How does that even make sense, Seraphina?" "He's a lawyer, Grayson," she shouted, her voice cracking under the weight of her pain. "I was meeting with him because I was buying a house. I was trying to surprise you because I wanted to give us a fresh start. I wanted to help you, to take some of the burden off your shoulders because I love you." Grayson's world stopped, the words crashing into him like a tidal wave. His mouth fell open, his heart plummeting as the truth hit him all at once. "A house?" Seraphina wiped at her tears, her chest heaving as she fought to steady her voice. "Yes, a house. I was trying to buy us a new place so that we wouldn't have to worry about money or debts or or anything else. I wanted to help you because you were hurting, because you were scared, and I thought if I could just give you a place that was ours, that maybe it would make things better." Grayson's legs felt weak, his body collapsing into the chair behind him as her words sank in. She had been trying to help him. She had been trying to save him, to build a future with him, and he had accused her of betrayal. "Seraphina, I didn't—" His voice broke, his eyes filling with tears. I thought you were—" She looked at him, her eyes full of pain and disappointment. "You thought I was cheating. You thought I was a liar. You didn't trust me. You didn't believe in me." Grayson buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking as his guilt consumed him. "I'm so sorry. I was scared. I was scared of losing you." Seraphina's face softened, her voice breaking. "You were so scared of losing me that you pushed me away. You followed me, you spied on me, you accused me of the worst thing imaginable, and you never once stopped to ask me what was going on." "I didn't know how," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I was so full of doubt. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't see what was right in front of me." Seraphina wiped at her tears, her expression hardening. "I never lied to you, Grayson, not once, but you've been lying to me from the start. You put me to a test I didn't know I was taking. You made me prove my love for you over and over, and even then, you didn't trust me." Her words were like knives, cutting him to the core. "I love you, Seraphina. I swear to God, I love you more than anything." She looked at him, her eyes cold and distant. "If that were true, you never would have doubted me." With that, she turned and walked out, leaving Grayson alone in the shattered remains of his own making. In the next part, Grayson and Seraphina will join forces to expose Lucian's true face. They will confront him, not only to reclaim their love but also to restore the trust that he shattered. But will Lucian's schemes be so easily defeated? And can Grayson and Seraphina truly heal after all the pain they've endured? The storm has only just begun, and the game of power is about to become more dangerous than ever before. Prepare yourself for part 2, where truths will be revealed, justice will be pursued, and the battle for love and redemption will reach its climax. Did you enjoy this story? If so, drop a like and leave a kind comment to encourage us. Your support means the world. And don't forget, we love you.